Hello, my name is Sam Povey. I'm an educator at the WSET School London, and today we'll be talking about the wines of the Northern Rhône. The Northern Rhône is a long, thin valley just to the south of Lyon. It's about 80 kilometres long, which is roughly the distance between London and Brighton, and it's best known for savoury red wines and full-bodied white wines. The Northern Rhône has a moderate continental climate, which means that the best wines tend to come from sites that have lots of sunlight interception and are maybe a little bit warmer than usual. The Rhône is heavily impacted by a powerful northerly wind called the Mistral, which can interrupt flowering and damage grapevines. We'll talk a little bit about how grape growers deal with this problem in a minute. Fortunately, many of the very best vineyards of the Northern Rhône are located on steep slopes. This provides plenty of protection from the Mistral, as well as increasing sunlight interception, which promotes ripeness in the grapes. The soils on these slopes are rocky, which limits the yield naturally. However, they are prone to erosion, and that prevents mechanization in the vineyards. All of this put together can increase the cost of growing grapes and therefore making wine substantially. Let's now discuss the grape varieties that you'll find in the Northern Rhône. Syrah is the only black grape variety that is planted in the Northern Rhône. Because of the Northern Rhône's moderate climate and the cooling effects of the Mistral, Syrah is at the very northern limit of where it can ripen successfully, and as a result, those steep, sheltered slopes are especially important for achieving adequate ripeness. Syrah tends to be quite a vigorous grape variety, which means that it grows a fairly large canopy, which can cause excessive shading on the grapes. As a result, the canes are usually pruned quite short and are trained to stakes to prevent damage from the powerful Mistral winds. Syrah tends to produce red wines with a deep colour, medium to high levels of tannin, ripe black fruit, as well as a peppery or sometimes floral aroma. The very best examples of Syrah age incredibly well in the Northern Rhône and produce savoury aroma characteristics with time. Oak maturation is common, with some producers favouring larger and older oak for more subtle oak characteristics, and other producers favouring smaller or newer oak barrels for more overt flavours of vanilla, cedar and smoke. Viognier is an aromatic white grape variety that tends to be planted in the subregion of Condrieu. It produces full-bodied wines with low acidity and high levels of alcohol, often with quite powerful blossom and apricot aromas. While it's an aromatic variety, producers do sometimes add further flavours to it through things like oak maturation and malolactic conversion. Marsanne and Roussanne are the two other white grape varieties. These two varieties are commonly blended together, Marsanne bringing richness and textural weight to the wines, whereas Roussanne brings more acidity and aromatic intensity. The result is usually a medium to full-bodied white wine, with the very best examples worthy of age. Now let's take a look at the various sub-regions of the Northern Rhône, starting in the very north with the Côte Rôtie, the roasted slope. This is a single southeasterly facing set of vineyards on steep terraces. These incredibly steep vineyard sites naturally limit yield because the soil is very poor in nutrients, which tends to encourage grape ripeness and therefore contribute to flavour concentration in the final wines. But the Côte Rôtie is at a very high latitude for Syrah. Unusually for red wines, Syrah is sometimes co-fermented with the aromatic white grape Viognier. This means that Syrah and Viognier grapes are fermented in the same vessel at the same time, and this is done to add colour and aromatic intensity to the wines. A maximum of 20% of Viognier can be added, although in practice, anywhere near this high a level is exceptionally rare. Condrieu is just next door to Côte Rôtie, and it produces aromatic, powerful white wines from the Viognier grape variety. Its vineyards are located on low-yielding terraced slopes, which contributes to Viognier's naturally high body, high level of alcohol and flavour concentration. Both Côte Rôtie and Condrieu are best known for producing exceptionally high quality red and white wines, respectively. Saint-Joseph is one of the largest appellations within the Northern Rhône. It's grown over 10 times in size since the 1950s and produces a variety of red and white wines. Red wines grown from Syrah on the relatively fertile flat valley floors tend to be grown at much higher yields and therefore have less ripeness and therefore less flavour concentration. Some winemakers will use techniques like semi-carbonic maceration to enhance the flavour concentration of these wines and limit the extraction of tannin. As a result, wines made on these vineyard sites tend to have medium tannin and medium body. If Syrah is grown in some of the lateral valleys, many of which have especially steep and south-facing slopes, the grapes will tend to achieve a much higher level of ripeness and therefore flavour concentration. Moreover, winemakers are therefore able to use much more extractive cap management techniques to extract greater levels of tannin, producing a much higher quality and fuller bodied style of red wine. The white wines of Saint-Joseph are made from blends of Marsanne and Roussanne grapes. Quality and style do vary considerably. Again, the best quality tend to be from steeply sloped vineyard sites, especially near the town of Toulon in the south of the region. Hermitage alongside Côte-Rôtie is one of the most prestigious appellations of the Northern Rhône. It sits on a single south-facing slope with very steep and poor quality soils. It has various lieux-dits, that's French for named places, of varying expositions, which does contribute to some variation in style and quality. But being further south than Côte-Rôtie and therefore being a little bit warmer, the red wines tend to be full-bodied and age-worthy. Unlike Côte-Rôtie, the wines are not co-fermented with Viognier. They are made entirely from Syrah. The white wines of Hermitage are blends of Roussanne and Marsanne. Like the reds, they tend to be quite full-bodied and uniformly high quality. Creuse-Hermitage is a significantly larger area surrounding the north and the south of Hermitage itself. As a result, the growing environment is much more varied. For example, the northern end tend to have lots more slopes, whereas the southern end is significantly flatter, and this contributes to much more variation in the style and quality. For example, in the southern end on those flatter vineyards, the yields from those vines tend to be much higher, and as a result, we tend to get wines with less flavour intensity. And again, like you would find in Saint-Joseph, on those flatter sites, you may see techniques like semi-carbonic maceration being used. This is in stark contrast to Hermitage itself, where the wines are of uniform quality and tend to be outstanding. It's worth noting that both red and white wines are produced in Creuse-Hermitage, the reds entirely from Syrah and the whites blends of Marsanne and Roussanne. The final appellation that we look at is Cornas. This is the warmest vineyard in the Northern Rhône. It is very well sheltered and has lots of south-facing steep slopes. The wines here are made entirely from Syrah, and because of that warmth and because of those steep slopes, we tend to produce some of the most powerful red wines that we're going to find in the Northern Rhône. Again, because we have relatively little variation in the growing environment, these wines are of uniformly high quality, with winemakers practicing quite extractive cap management techniques to get high levels of tannin, making a full-bodied red wine. We're now going to go through an exam-style question of the format that you might get in the short answer portion of the exam itself. The question reads, red wines from Hermitage are often full-bodied and high in tannin. Identify and explain 2 winemaking factors that could contribute to this style. The question is for 6 marks, and the command verbs that you need to pay attention to are identify and explain. That means that the marks would be broken up with 1 mark for identifying a relevant winemaking factor and roughly 2 marks for explaining how it contributes to the style, which in this case is the full body of the wine and the high level of tannins. One factor that you could identify is cap management. Using techniques such as punching down or pumping over will ensure greater extraction of tannin from the skins during fermentation. Managing the timing and the frequency of extraction will ensure the desired level of tannins is achieved. Another factor could be post-fermentation extraction. You could explain this by saying that maceration after fermentation encourages further extraction of tannin from the skins. So leaving the wine on the skins will increase the level of tannin and can help create a smooth tannin structure. There are other options. For example, you could talk about the role of oak aging or the temperature of fermentation, which will also contribute to higher levels of tannin extraction. Thanks very much for watching, and good luck with your studies.